Kate, so thank you so much for joining us. I've been chatting to you on Twitter for a good few years now, I think. um,
Yeah.
and you're very much, should we say, an EV enthusiast? You've been in the world a little while.
I think it's fair to say that absolutely. I kind of entered the EV world back in 2019 when I attended the All Energy Expo in Glasgow, and I'd gone to scout for wind and solar business, but had actually found that there was this huge undercurrent of electric vehicles going on, and that's kind of where I got hooked, and I wanted to learn more, and I learned about the industry and all the charge point manufacturers and the variety of cars that were available at the time. Started listening to Fully Charged, watching the YouTube videos back then. That was before the podcast even started, and just started following people who had a bit of credibility in the industry. I think one of them was you, Gary. So I have been in this space for a while, but I feel like I've really immersed properly since September 2020, when I received my first EV, which was a company car. I was very privileged to get that, and it was a 64 kilowatt Hyundai Kona. So fantastic car to start with. I was very spoiled for choice, and since then, it's that experience as a real life EV driver has just really taken things to a whole new level for me.
Brilliant. And as part of that experience, you've had to charge at some chargers around the place, and I think you've had a few experiences that are probably not the best experience.
Right. I mean, even the very first experience, I had to drive from Grimsby back to Reading. That journey in itself was about 300 miles, and the person who had driven the car before me very kindly left it on 69%. So I didn't have the full range to get home on anyway. I had to actually stop at Watford Gap services, and at the time that was being serviced by the Ecotricity version of the electric highway. It was a 7 kilowatt charge that I arrived to, and I had no idea about the strength of the chargers and how, what it meant to overstay your welcome past 45 minutes. There was this pre-authorization fee. I didn't know if I needed AC or DC and what connector, and it just blew my mind. So I literally sat at the charger and I ugly cried because I didn't know what to do. And actually I jumped straight onto Twitter, and it was the Twitter community that saved me. And I said, guys, I'm stuck at Watford Gap. I don't know what to do. And so many people came onto that post and just gave really valuable advice. They told me which apps to look for to map out my next charger, which services were the most reliable, and they just saved my day. But my goodness, it was a baptism of fire into the
I
world
do
of
actually
EV.
remember. I remember that tweet very well, because that was actually really. I remember actually showing my partner that tweet, because she was really concerned about the EV, again, an EV at the time, and I just said, look, there's a brilliant community out there who will help you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
on the other hand, and perhaps there's another aspect to that, which maybe there shouldn't need to be that help, but you should have been able to know what was going on from whoever gave you the car in the first place. I mean,
100%.
we know dealers are not very good at that explanations. I mean, I still see it today. I mean, I was at a charger about 3 or 4 days ago, and someone was plugging in Type 2 charger into a CCS port because they had not been told what the rubber button was for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had some great conversations just very recently with some other curious EV attempters, I would say, people who want to make the move to EV. They're still convinced that hybrid is the best stepping stone to that. And I've said to them, absolutely not. I think hybrid really did serve its purpose back when the early adopters were picking up EV for the people who were really, really against going full electric, just to make them feel more comfortable with the whole process. And actually, you're 100% right. It starts with the dealership. The dealership not doing enough to educate its drivers before that car leaves the forecourt. It really does need to be a case of you take the car out for a test drive them to a public charger, show them how to use it, show them how the mapping and navigational services work within the car. Because I know, for instance, in the Kona, it comes up when you've got low charge, and it says, oh, these are the stations that are local to you. So that does help, but it's not 100% reliable. So knowing how to use the navigational system within the car, and knowing which apps to turn to when you're looking for specific information about the charger itself. So yeah, 100% education needs to start at the dealership. If you are then passing off a car to an employee as part of your fleet, please do educate them, because otherwise they're going to feel very sad within hours of leaving in that car.
And I've also discussed with some of the charge point operators whether there should be more education actually at the charge points as well, whether there's some better signage around.
Yeah, I mean,
what charges.
It's the whole process, isn't it? It's you know, do you queue for the charger? Who gets to go first? How long should you stay plugged in? We all know from experience 0 to 80% is all you need. If you're going to have to drive 600, 700 miles, go to another charger a little bit further along, get to that 80%, and then move on, because you don't need to get from the 80 to 100%. It's not necessary. And it takes the same amount of time to get from 80 to 100% as it does from 0 to 80. These are all things that we know as hardened EV drivers, and something that, you know, the Twitter sphere are quite happy to share with each other. But even something as simple as a QR code that you could tap your phone on that opens a general etiquette guide similar to the highway code. I'd really, really love to see OZEV jump on that and create like a standardized way of how we approach chargers when we're at a service station, as an example. I'm sure it could be rolled out everywhere, but certainly we're seeing the service stations get a lot busier now. So we do just need a gentle nudge to say that's not how to behave at a charger. Don't go and look through someone's window at their state of charge. And actually the newer machines are showing very clearly that state of charge, so hopefully that won't be happening too much longer.
Won't be so much of an issue, although actually some of the more modern cars can actually charge beyond 80% at a fairly reasonable rate, so there is that as well. So I mean, certainly my car can go 85% before you really start plummeting there. So yeah, I mean these things are going to change over time. We've just got to keep up with it, I guess. But charging standards and standards around charges is something you're very passionate about at the moment, and this kind of brings us on to Charge Safe, which is what I really want to talk about tonight, because I think it's an amazing initiative and so important.
Thank you. Yes, charging standards are questionable for a large majority of the infrastructure that is currently available. So what I will say, and I always say, is that the charging infrastructure will never be as bad as it is today, because it improves every day. So for me, I was traveling up and down the country. I was an events manager, so it meant I would be in Glasgow one day and Birmingham the next. You know, I put on a lot of mileage in that Kona, and in doing so, I had to stop at the service stations, I had to stop in industrial estates, I had to stop at shopping centres, you know, anywhere that was nearby enough where I felt like the charge point provider was reliable. And I got into some shady situations. You know, what I will say is I would probably say 5% of the times that I charged, it was scary, quite terrifying, to the point where I was shaking. The other 95%, I felt safer. But the charge would have taken longer, or the charge point failed to initialize, or it hadn't been serviced. And, you know, operations and maintenance gets really put on the back burner for some certain networks. Now, I won't name them, but I'm pretty sure that you know who I mean. So what I experienced was, you know, a lot of abandoned car parks, poorly lit, with no cameras, absolutely no human activity nearby. And it happened on a couple of occasions. And the last time it happened was enough for me to say, I have had enough. I have been on Twitter. I have tagged these operators in. I have called them out. I've told them that we need change in the industry to make women feel safer. And the reason why I say women feel safer is because I'm biased. I am a woman. But by default, if I make women feel safer, the men should feel safer too. I'm not saying that we're massively vulnerable or terribly weak or anything like that. I'm saying that, you know, it is a known fact that women are more likely to be assaulted out in public. It's a sad thing, but you know, let's start with the women. Everybody else gets to feel safe as a result of it. And I was discussing this with my partner, and he said, you know, instead of just moaning about it on Twitter, why don't we just do something about it? And I'm quite lucky because he's an incredibly intelligent man. He is a games developer and software developer. So he's he really loves innovation. You know, he's constantly looking at different ways to produce technology, and he's got the heart of the entrepreneur, as do I. I have previously run my own marketing company. So we kind of put our heads together and just thought, you know, what would incentivize these charge point network operators to make improvements? And then we thought about, you know, Trustpilot, the NCAP rating system, or even the hygiene rating system. It's usually out of 5. Now, if a restaurant had a rating system of 3 or less, you're probably going to give it a swerve.
Yeah.
If it's got 4 or 5, you're going to feel like you can rating system. So we thought, okay, let's rate every public charger in the UK, mental, out of 5 stars based on its safety. And how do we break that down? So we put it out on Twitter because that's where the whole EV community is, it appears. And we said, what would make you feel safer at a charge point? And we got all of that feedback from everyone. It's a really popular post, to the point where Ian Johnston at Osprey actually DM'd me and said, I'm watching this post with particular interest. I'm really interested to see what people have to say. And I was like, that's great, Ian. I've got something coming your way. I'll give you a call when it's ready. And lo and behold, he is one of the first networks that we've been in very serious discussions with, and we're hoping that we can bring them on board in future. So we looked at the environment at the charge point. You know, is it well lit? Are the cameras covering the chargers? When you arrive at the in the car park or in the industrial estate, is it signed clearly enough that you wouldn't have to play hide and seek with the charger, and you know exactly where it is? So you've got the environment of the charger, then you've got the facilities of the charger. So is there a loo nearby? Can you get a tea or coffee or any food? Are there accommodation services nearby? What's the level of human activity? How far away are you from that human activity? So we're looking at environment and facilities. And then we're looking at the charge points themselves. So is the charge point actually working is a pretty big one. You know, I think on certain mapping applications at the moment, you can go on and it might tell you if a charge point is down, that, or you have to read through all of the comments and it could say an issue was reported 2 days ago, but you don't know if that issue has actually been remedied since. So it's still a guessing game. So we want to look at the functionality of the charge point. Is it actually working? We also want to look at how many charge points are there, because actually, you know, the more charge points there are, it does actually make it safer, because there could be other people that are charging at the same time. We look at things like the pre-authorization process. So, you know, is it £1 to pre-authorize your charge, or is it £30 to pre-authorize your charge? And if that charge fails to initialize, what's that refund policy like? Are they going to hold on to your 30 quid for 30 days, which is what one of them does? Or are they going to put that pound back in your account straight away? And that does really make a difference, because if I have £40 left in my bank account and I go to charge and it takes 30 quid and it fails to initialize, I might not have enough money to find another charger and to pre-authorize another fee. So really, really serious things to consider. And, you know, we'd wrapped up the safety element, and I was quite happy with the idea, and I drove to COP26 in Glasgow, and I had the great fortune of being sat next to Mr. Graham Cooper of National Grid at a networking lunch. And I said, hey, Graham, I've got an idea. I think I'm mad, because I love my job and I can't imagine leaving it. But what do you think? And he said, I'll tell you what, Kate, accessibility is something that's really important as well. If you can add that in and really make this a rounded package for safety and accessibility, I think you've got something really special here. So we started to take it very seriously, and before we know it, we're on a Zoom call with Edmund King at the AA, and he loved it. He loved the idea, and he still does. He's been endorsing us quite publicly. Yeah, which is amazing. You know, it's really amazing. So we're hoping to work very closely with the AA to deliver a service that should complement the rating service. So yeah, we're doing safety and accessibility ratings. We're not the best people to advise on accessibility. Myself and my partner are both able-bodied. So we hooked up with Motability, And we asked them for their guidance, and we've been having a look at the PAS document that's been out for public consultation. It's currently being drafted, and I think that actually closed a couple of days ago. So we're waiting to see, which measures have made it through. But in the meantime, we've actually included almost all of the measures in our official inspections. We've also teamed up with John Brooks, aka Beardy McBeardface, who is our mobility ambassador. So we will be contacting John every time we make any type of accessibility change and just asking, does this mean anything to you? Is this something that's important? Is it something that we don't need to include? And how, what's the vibe? So we're very much aware that, we are a team of EV enthusiasts and developers, and we want to make it work, but we need to take advice from the right people. So we are developing the tech, and it's almost ready to go. It's just a really exciting time. The feedback from the community has been incredible, and we're just getting ready to release the first batch of scores.
So how are you actually going to handle that rating? Because obviously, if you went to do every single one, it would take you a very long time.
It would. Yeah, it's a bit wild. Currently I think it's 31,500 charge points on UK roads at almost 20,000 locations now. That number is steadily increasing, and will continue to increase. So how on earth do you keep up with something like that? What we are aiming to do now is, we'd previously anticipated going back to every single charge point and doing a quarterly review. However, it's just not going to be physically possible. We are 2 people, and we do actually have 2 other developers, by the way. They're just taking no money. They're not being paid, but they're fantastic. Their names are Andy and Xavier, and they've been incredible. So we have got a very small team. It's a very modest operation at the moment. So we thought, right, if we can just level everything out, we'll start from the bottom of the country and work our way up, because we're based in Chichester. We're very much on the south coast, and let's focus on everything that's 50 kilowatts and above for the first chunk of the work, because they are the most likely ones that we're going to stop at en route late at night. Yep. Otherwise, it will be something that's, a lamppost or connected curb, and you're likely to plug it into something of that size if you're staying overnight or you're parked all day. So we're going to start at the 50 kilowatts and above, level everything out. Then we're going to build communities around those chargers. So I'm not sure if you're actually a part of it, Gary, but we have been asking people to beta test our public inspection option, which is 10 questions or less. And it's for drivers to really just go to the charger and say, is the lighting working? Are there cameras there? Do you feel safe? What are the facilities like? It's very, very brief. But what we're hoping is that the public will continue to service those chargers. So we've got a lot of real-time data pouring in to let us know if a light bulb goes out, or if something's been vandalized overnight. Those real-time changes that would be next to impossible for us to keep up with unless we were planted right next to the charger 24/7. So you get the human element of going out to inspect the charger. We've got tape measures for all the accessibility measures, because they're very exact and to the point. And then there are some more perceptive type questions and more objective type questions. So really something that needs to be serviced by human beings, but we've really got our work cut out for us. So please do be patient as we try to deliver it. But what we're hoping to do is to become, one of the largest employers of nationwide inspectors, to be out on UK roads driving EVs and inspecting these units full time.
Sounds a fantastic idea. So one thing which came up when I showed this to my partner was, we're parents of very small children. Our twins are under 2, and accessibility isn't always about disability. We have all sorts of issues actually getting the children in and out of cars at some of these charges, and that was something we wondered if you were going to cover that as well.
Yeah, I think by default that's kind of covered off with the bay sizes. So if something is considered accessible for people with mobility issues, then it's going to be accessible for someone with a pushchair. If we can break that down any further on our personal website, so on our actual ChargeSafe website, I'm sure that's something we can do. That's a great suggestion, in fact, because we have just been looking at safety and accessibility. So we could put like a little pushchair symbol to show that it's, buggy friendly,
Well,
perhaps.
bank friendly is one thing. The other thing which comes up a lot is we talk about having toilet facilities, but is there baby changing facilities available? Are the bins, which is a big thing, available, and those sort of things. And it's not just obviously baby things; it's toddlers and beyond that's equally applies to. And the biggest issue I think, and this is obviously an accessibility issue anyway, is the bollards people put around chargers.
Oh, yes, they love to protect their tech, don't they?
Of course, I mean, they're expensive, and I kind of get it, because there have been quite a few incidents where people have reversed into them and the like. But there are other ways of protecting that investment, and obviously, I mean, the big thing I think at the moment, and I was talking to Dora from Osprey about this for the charge, is the fact we are getting some British standards in place now, which will make it more easy to incentivize the landowners to actually do some of this accessibility work, because that's definitely been the big challenge up to now.
Oh my goodness. Honestly, the landowners have a lot to answer for. And I know this from, having very early conversations with Ian. So again, Osprey, where he explained to me in a really lovely way, because, I'm going to him and I'm saying, we're gonna be rating all of the charge point network operators. And he said, well, it's not as simple as that. What I didn't actually realize is the landlords have put a huge amount of pressure onto the charge point networks by being so uncooperative from day one. We know it was a land grab exercise. We know there was a lot of competition out there in order to get the retail units with certain landlords. So if you just have a look at the likes of Lidl versus Morrison's, for example, if Lidl turned around and said, well, we're not going to give you 3 spaces so you can make them into 2 accessible bays, and the grid connection only goes this far, so this is exactly where the charge points need to be located, which could be at the back end of a corner of a car park. We're not going to put in an extra connection for you to put a lamppost over it, for example, and we're not going to do all these things because we know if you don't accept these terms and conditions, you've got a competitor literally a 5-minute phone call away, and we'll seal the deal with them. So a lot of these charge point network operators really kind of just had to say yes to whatever they were offered at the time. And it's only now that we're seeing all these issues come into play, and it's like, who's penalizing the landlords? So what we're going to do is, for the networks that come on board and subscribe to our services, we'll be providing them with the data to show them, this is how your location has scored. This is why it's scored in the way it has. And also, this is the location, this is the landlord that you have, so that they then have a bit of clout to go back to their landowners and say, well, actually, we're seeing more traffic go to Tesco's than to Morrison's. Purely an example. I don't know this is factual, by the way, because there's better lighting in one than there is in the other, and one is open 24/7 and the other closes at 8 p.m. So we're really just hoping to support the charge wet network operators as much as we can by delivering that data service. But one thing that I do really want to stipulate is, whilst we're taking on networks as our subscribers for the data, that is purely it, we will not be accepting any partnership or advertising money from those networks, because we need to remain an independent third party to be able to inspect these assets and to be able to look at a location as if it's brandless and go through the marking system. And we will be audited by a separate third party, just to ensure that it's completely unbiased and that the assessor has the competence in order to carry out that assessment.
I have to say, this sounds absolutely brilliant, and something I wish had been there from a bit earlier on, because I think it may have had a bit of a help in stopping some of this issues we've had with the landlords and particularly, as you said, the land grab. I mean, one of the, and we've talked about maintenance already. One of the things I've always been concerned about is how much funding has been there for installation without the revenue funding to actually maintain these things going forward. I mean, certainly the government grant system hasn't helped there. With councils, for example, the councils getting lots of money to install the chargers and no money at all to maintain them, and they're not going to have the budgets to maintain them.
No, I mean, that's one thing, but just take a look at Charge Place Scotland. You have private owners of Charge Place Scotland assets who have been that, you know, they've given permission for this thing to go in the ground, they've paid for the asset, people are using them to charge, but again, they're in unlit locations, they're poorly maintained, and that's because these small business owners have been sold this asset believing it's going to make them more money, but not understanding, you know, what it takes to maintain these units and make sure that people are going to be safe when they're using them. So we've seen a couple of examples specifically in Scotland where they are extremely remote, as is the nature of Scotland, but it's only a matter of time before their competitors realize that this is a problem and moving across the road, and then suddenly those assets that they've poured their, you know, potentially life savings into become completely worthless because they couldn't get a light over it, or they couldn't make sure that it was serviced and maintained in regular intervals. So yeah, 100% the support provided to anyone who's installed infrastructure from a government level has been really poor.
Yeah, I do think we're starting to see some better things coming on. There's British standards stuff coming in, which I think is really good to see. I mean, doing that. I mean, I think also there's a little bit of onus on the charge point suppliers as well here. I think some of the equipment they've supplied has probably not been fit for purpose in UK conditions.
I could think of a few, but you know, we've got some really exciting players coming in now. I mean, the Power kit that Osprey have just invested in. How good is that?
As shown behind me, this is in the UK install. I actually put this up as probably a good example of what a good location should look like. This is over in Belgium, I believe.
It is great as well, because it's got the side-on chargers. So the side-on chargers are really good because it means you don't have to drive into or reverse into a spot. And if somebody does have accessibility issues, you've got that extended cable. You can see there in the picture behind you, Gary, that the cable length is enough for somebody to park far enough away that they could get potentially a wheelchair in that gap to get the cable out. I think actually, is there a shorter one behind? I'm just trying to see if the handle is a little bit shorter, because these are all things. There's another one as well to the back on the left. Maybe they're the accessible ones. But you know, you do see some real adjustments. And I know that you were at the Norwich opening a couple of weeks ago. Those accessibility bays are inspired because the LED screens are lower, the payment receptacle is lower, the plug is lower. So, you know, if you're rocking up in a seated position, if you're in a wheelchair or a mobility scooter, you can easily access it. It has got those cable arms coming over for the cable management to just be made so much simpler. It takes the weight out of it. It means it's easier to navigate into the plug socket. You know, they've really thought about it. Even between the tire stops, the gap between the tire stops and the charge point itself is wide enough to be able to get a mobility scooter or a wheelchair in between that gap. I was there with my tape measure. I did an inspection at Norwich. I felt incredibly guilty because I was like, you know, here I am on opening day with my tape measure, telling them if they've done a good enough job or not. But they have done a fantastic job. And, you know, again, that score will be released very soon. But it's really exciting to see the likes of GridServe and Osprey really jumping on this and saying, okay, we're hearing you, and we're making these adaptations now. And with the likes of Power, you know, coming in and saying, we've developed charge points in a completely different way, and this is how it could look. You know, we don't need a cookie cutter template for everything. We need that diversification. We need innovation. So it's really exciting to see that coming in.
And it was great talking both Osprey and Power. You know, they get it. I mean, I was just talking to some of the Power stand, and they were talking about the weight management on the things and how they could even improve that further, because they know that they're still a bit heavy for some disabled users to be able to use and difficult to align, and what they can actually do to make that better. I mean, one of the big problems obviously with CCS charging, and particularly high power charging, is the fact you do need fairly thick cables which are heavy, and it's actually difficult to mitigate for that. And how do you do that? And obviously this location behind me again actually has attendance service potentially as well, available as well for anybody who can't move the cables, and that's a big thing as well. Most of our charging locations, as you well know, have no attendance available to them, and
not when it's in a bush, Gary. No.
Yeah. So, but we are seeing some operators actually doing that as well. MFG Group, one of my dark horses, I think, in the charging world. Virtually all their locations have attended service, and they do have a disability service, although I wouldn't say necessarily all their charges are particularly accessible, but they have that as an option. So that's another element, I guess, to it, that you've got that service culture of being available to them, and that will come in more, I think, as we get more charges in locations with vendors. I mean, like the GridServe at Norwich, obviously they're in place there. They can look after it. They know if there's anybody having problems, they'll look after them. It's just, I think we're still going to suffer, I think, from the invested architecture, the stuff which has been there for 5 years now. Some of the locations which are in some of these retail places where the landlords have not been forthcoming with charges, and I'm not sure how we solve that. I mean, have you got any ideas? I guess the
legislation will solve that.
Yeah. And I guess
Yeah.
your rating will help with as well. I mean, if some of these places start getting low ratings and see a drop off in customers, then they'll start to rethink how they do some of these spaces, I guess.
So that is kind of, the unanticipated outcome of this service is it does create more of a competitive market. If you've got a low charge safe rating, you're going to want to know why, and as a result, when we pass these ratings over to the likes of Electric Juice as an example, and they pop it up on their mapping application, and you've got to decide whether you're going to turn left or right, and one's got a charge safe rating of 4.7 and the other one's got one of 2.3. If safety or accessibility is your priority, that's where you're going to go. And then everybody who suddenly scores 3 or less are going to be thinking, how can we improve this? They start to apply pressure onto the landlords because they can clearly demonstrate that they're losing customers as a result of it. And then the landlords could apply pressure to local authority and government level. So it has a really nice, from the ground up effect. And I just feel like those companies who are the independents, GridServe, Osprey, Tyrrell, ones that have come in to create this infrastructure because it was needed and it's the right thing to do. Those are the guys who are being innovative and they're reacting to their customers, and they are going to be the ones, that I predict will enjoy a very long business life. It's the others who have been very slow on the uptake. And I will say, Shell and BP have got some reputational damage that they really need to fix, certainly in terms of the operations and maintenance of their units to gain their customers' trust again. So only with that will they have improved charge safe scores, and hopefully all we want to do, Gary, is make it safe and accessible for everyone. And that's the whole point. Is when myself and my partner James sat down and we talked about this, the thing that was the most important to us was making sure that if a woman has to stop at a charger at 3 a.m, she feels safe. If someone in a wheelchair needs to charge, they're not going to be discriminated against because they're in a wheelchair, no matter which charge point they go to. And it was the idea that came before any of the business stuff fell into it. So it was kind of like, this is what we want to do. How can we make this a successful business to ensure we can deliver that service? So it's all come from a good place.
A very good place. I have to say, I'm really enthusiastic about this. I wish you the world of luck in getting it off the ground, and we will talk to you more about this, I'm sure, in the future. For now, how if anybody wants to find out about this, do they find out about ChargeSafe?
So the best place to go for more information is to our website, which is www.chargesafe.uk. There's no co in there. .uk. We couldn't get the .co.uk. Or following us on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn. We had to get our minds around the joys of TikTok. But they can follow me directly, Kate_Tyrrell, that's TYRRELL on Twitter. I tend to retweet everything that comes from the ChargeSafe account anyway. So or even just reaching out to us directly. So we've got an email which is hello@chargesafe.uk if they want any more information.
Brilliant. Well, we'll try and put most of that in the show notes as well, so that people can link through and find things quickly, because I think this is a brilliant idea and something I'll definitely be supporting. So thanks for your time again, Kate, and we will definitely get you on again a little bit further down the line to see how things are going.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Gary.